Okay. Yeah, everyone just plug your ears if it's like, please.
See people all squint at once. I mean, it's way too
loud. Okay. Yeah. We have a couple seats up front if anyone wants to. Yeah, I've got like 4. We're not going to call on anybody if you're like one of those people who's like wanting to hide. Like,
not me.
Yeah. Just you guys, because we assume you're comfortable.
Right, front row. Check it out. They can't control me.
Okay.
They can't control me. Put your step in.
Okay. You get a mic.
Okay. We're probably good on time. They're shutting doors.
Okay.
Make sure this guy works here. I'll stand over here.
Okay. Are you going to change the slides? Or you want me to?
Either one of us. Okay, can everybody hear me? You're okay, I got thumbs up. What about you?
Me, can you hear me? Okay. Okay. Well, hello everyone. Did everybody enjoy the keynote? I will personally start by saying I relate to these issues. I was diagnosed with OCD when I was probably 11 or 12. I have a very anxious mind. I overcame my OCD through years of hard work, but I still have a very anxious mindset. That's just how I am. So if I start talking really fast, probably just a little wired. This is my first time speaking at a professional conference and at a BSides. This is our 4th year at this BSides, and this is like the 4th BSides here, I think.
Is it
right?
I think
this is their 4th. So we're both really happy to be here. I wanted to speak, and BSides means a lot to me because I'm about 4 years into my career, and I felt like it was about time I made myself get up here and talk. So, yeah, today we're going to talk about information security, tools of the trade. This is a very green talk, so this is kind of aimed for entry-level people. It's a talk I would have loved to have gone to at my first conference because I showed up and read all the talks, and I was like, I don't know what any of these things are or where I should be. So this is for the people that are new.
Mm-hmm. It is basically the greenest of green talks, minus the whole... Well, if you're brand new, there are some things that may not be understood, but they are in the slides for that reason. They're typical use cases, things like that, to get started. But first, we'll kick off.
I'm Tara Wink. I am married to Jason Smith, but I'm Tara Wink. I have a background in physics. I did not go to college for computer science or anything IT related. I started out in physics. I graduated and was like, it's great, I got a physics degree. What do I want to do with this?
Physics factory.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to have had a job in security, probably like my sophomore year of college, which kind of sparked my interest in, how do computers talk to each other and kind of learning about packet captures. But that didn't really keep my interest because I was in physics, so I didn't really hold all that information in until after I graduated and got a job at the state of Kentucky. I had a kind of general security role there. They didn't really know what they hired me to do. They just knew they needed a security person, and I fit that box. So my first year of work was kind of find what you need to do here to make the environment secure. And so that was kind of fun. It was kind of do what you want to do. And I picked up testing web applications, which kind of led me into my next job, which was pen testing. I did pen testing for about a year and a half. I really enjoyed that. It was fascinating work. But then I switched over, and now I do more blue team stuff. I work for a healthcare company called Change Healthcare, and I work on the SOC team there. I'm the level 3 analyst, and so I have a little bit of both worlds. But
yeah, I've mostly been blue team. So I got a physics degree as well. I graduated and became a sanitation engineer immediately. And when I say that, I literally had a degree, and I went to go work at the local park as a garbage man. I got picked up by an old professor who was like, hey, you should parse all this data. You were great at it with me, and you worked with me, so come work for me. And the data was PCAPs. and that's history. I've now worked for several state and federal agencies. I currently work with Cisco ATA. It's kind of their MSS service offering that they have. Recently, quit from FireEye. Not for any kind of bad reasons. I had the greatest team ever. In fact, my old boss is speaking at the end of the today, Chris Sanders, who, wrote Practical Back Analysis, all that stuff. Great guy. And the rest of the team was just as great. But now my new Cisco team, also awesome. Co-authored Applied Network Security Monitoring with Chris. Again, I started in Bowling Green, like where Tara kind of started with the Cyber Defense Lab. I was actually across the hallway from Tara at a different company, and we kind of worked together contract-wise. I'm married to Tara.
Hello. So before we get started, again, we kind of mentioned this is a green room talk. It's for very entry-level people. It's for people that are new to information security. Is this anyone's first BSides?
That's awesome.
Is anyone here just like brand new to information security?
Awesome.
Okay. Is anyone like in an IT job, but you're like wanting to transition to the security group?
Okay.
Yeah, we got a couple people everywhere.
Okay,
so.
This is a productive audience then. Good talk.
Okay. Anyone recently graduated and you're here because you're like hoping to land a job somewhere? No hands, really. Okay.
Techie high schoolers.
Kinda, yeah.
Any techie high schoolers? No. Oh, one techie high schooler. Okay.
Okay. Okay,
So yeah, it's basically, it's also to give, if you like to mentor and you just really like to hear like other ways of doing things, this may not be a better way, but hopefully it's at least going to be a slightly different way that you can kind of take it away and maybe show some other people. We like to mentor a lot of people up in Bowling Green and here in Nashville, and try to pull in different people if they are interested. High schoolers who think, well, there's not really anything. I don't know what to do in college. I just know I have to go. Well, we're like, well, there are alternatives and things you can do while in college, which, we go into in this talk. Not targeted at people who are like, oh, that's not the right way to teach people, blah, blah. That can be told afterwards. We can fix this up as needed after. But, for the most part, if you're like, this is not advanced enough, it's probably because you are too advanced. And the talk probably isn't geared for you.
Yep. So leave now. No, I'm kidding. No. Anyway, so yeah.
So what we're talking about today is operations in security. We won't really talk much about compliance or administration. But for the sake of knowing, compliance is really why we all have jobs. There are laws made that say that companies have to do the security stuff. And so what we do is, over time, some guys or some gals like, hey, we should probably actually do operational security and monitor stuff, or maybe do some sort of vulnerability testing or pen testing. And so those jobs occur. But rarely were those jobs the laws made. So compliance is kind of where things start from a legal perspective, and where a lot of companies really get into gear on getting security operations going afterwards.
It's more of like your auditing group. So if you want to be an auditor and go in and say, hey, how well is this company doing with security? That would be a compliance job. You'd be in an auditing role.
So what we talk about today isn't the limit to security, in case you're interested. There are also a lot of compliance jobs. More than most jobs, actually. There are more compliance gigs. Maybe not here necessarily, but, I lived in Charleston, for instance, and in just, the organization I work with there, they had 200 auditors in one office. So there are a lot of auditing positions, but, there's also administration. Won't talk about that much. They basically keep things going. They're not always super technical, but they're always super needed. So how do you learn this stuff? Basically, we always recommend that you know somebody else who's trying to learn this stuff, or know somebody who already does this stuff. It's always very productive if you can go on and not learn this stuff on your own, because it's easy to fall off the wagon if you're new to it. It may seem overly complicated, overly technical, but if you have somebody else, they may say, oh, well, this is actually how this is done. Or you may be able to help them say, well, it's not as hard as you think. Let's get the result, and then we can figure out, the process and things like that. We also are trying to say that everything we show here is all free. It doesn't cost money to learn this stuff. There are costly ways of doing it, but from your house, you can do all this stuff for free.
Right. So the main goal is to talk about the operations team, what operations people do, and if you wanted to get started in that role, what are things you can do for free at home to kind of get yourself started as an entry-level person.
So first, we talk about operations. Mainly, we're going to talk red team and blue team stuff. Red team are the hacker types, and blue team are the surveillance types. Talk more in detail about those.
So red team. So we have here basically a job description. If anybody has been researching for a job lately, you've probably ran through a million job descriptions. They all look like this. You can't read that because you zone out, and they all ask for you to know a million different things. And it's kind of hard to think just by reading a job description, like, what would my actual day-to-day look like? Like, what does this person actually do? Because they really just want you to do everything.
Right. The process is the same for no matter what level of experience you are. Generally, if you're looking for a new job, you come across a bunch of stuff, and if you are timid, you're probably like, I don't actually know all of this stuff. This is, I feel like maybe I should be farther. And that's where a lot of, what's the syndrome?
Imposter syndrome, which was mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that's where a lot of that comes from, is that you have big listings like this, and they seem impossibly hard to actually get to learn. But in reality,
the real job. What does a pen tester do? Lots of different stuff. Mainly you test for vulnerabilities. You try to exploit them. You try to help companies figure out how to resolve those issues that you found were exploitable. So you're helping companies basically protect their environment. You do that. There's also social engineering. So everyone's heard of, fake calling, trying to get passwords from people, or sending phishing emails. So there's lots of social engineering events that you can do as a pen tester. You make malware, of course, because you're trying to make exploits to exploit things. So there's lots of, if you like coding, and, if you're really into figuring out how exploits work and you like coding, probably a job you'll really enjoy. And you do lots of reporting. About half the time in a pen testing job, you're going to do your test, and then you're going to spend a solid amount of time writing reports. If you hate technical writing, there's your warning.
So, blue team, I love network security monitoring, obviously. We do network security monitoring, which is, monitoring network traffic going to and from different hosts and different networks and all kinds of good stuff, bad guys, good guys. We do host monitoring, which is usually a subset of that once we find bad stuff. Host monitoring is, going to the actual, host device or something like that, maybe pulling logs, or maybe you already send them to some other searching tool. A lot of surveillance type stuff. We track bad guys and we track good guys alike, friendly detection or friendly asset detection, and also tracking bad guys. We analyze malware sometimes. So there are dedicated people to analyzing malware. There are dedicated people for network security monitoring. There are dedicated people for basically each one of these things. And the same can go for red team work as well, that in some gigs, you may be dedicated more towards one aspect of those. And in blue team gigs, you may be dedicated to one aspect of these. And some people are just, jack of all trades, that do a lot of different things. So Infosec is actually quite easy and fun, right? There's like 10 things at most. You can do red team and blue team, right? Well, it's actually a few different things. There are a lot of tools involved. It's not just 5 tools for one and 5 tools for the other. And it may look like you have to learn all this stuff, and this is just that job description all over again. And so it's a little rough. But in reality, this actually isn't too bad. So essentially when you start out, things are a mile wide and an inch deep, especially if you don't have a focus on what you like. Right. A lot of people don't already know what they like. I mean, you've been in red team, blue team, and administration.
I'm still figuring out what I like, so.
All right, and I think that's the idea, is that if you make a career out of this, that's what you're doing. The good news is that once you get past this learning curve right here, which is pretty difficult to do, it's like you start learning more stuff than ever, quicker than ever, and it's of more impact than ever, and these jobs start to look more obvious than ever, and things aren't so bad, and before you know it, a few years later, you're already coasting up here at the top, and it's kind of easy street. And then some people will go a little bit farther, and they go crazy about analyzing malware, and maybe if you're a red team person, you're actually doing all these bug bounties and all kinds of stuff. So you can make it as fun as you want, as difficult as you want, but know that there is a learning curve no matter what you do, and you'll get past it. It's just a matter of time.
So before we go forward, we're going to talk about some tools, and we just want to warn everybody, if you want to set up these tools and play with them at home, we highly recommend it, but we just advise a lot of caution. Please don't do this on public networks or anything that doesn't belong to you or anything that you do not have explicit permission to test. It's highly illegal. Usually we feel like nobody can see us on the internet. I'm behind my computer. False. A lot of people are watching with blue team tools. And if you get
caught,
a lot
of money to do it.
Yeah, a lot of legislation is in place, and a lot of people fear this idea of hackers are going to get me because people are getting got all the time. So, caution, be careful.
So, all those tools we mentioned, just forget about it. In reality, you'll come across what you need as you need it. Right. But there are some concepts more that you should really try to get into, from our perspective at least. This is what helped us. It's what we still use today. Some prereqs. I think that a person who is in information security should be pretty well versed at the command line at a Linux distro of choice. Specifically, we're going to talk about a few different tools, a few different ISOs that will create these virtual machines. If you're unaware of what those are, we'll talk about those briefly. But look at these tools, look them up. These are free things that you can download, and they will get you going. Again, these are some links to how to really get practice at the command line, even if you don't even have it set up just yet. And basically these aren't specifically related to Infosec directly. They're related to all things IT, especially like coding or anything like that. But they will be very, very, very valuable in Infosec.
So virtual machines. If you want to set up a lab at home, highly recommend virtual machines. Does everyone in here, anyone not know what virtual machines are? Never heard of them.
Well, that's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question.
Who all knows what virtual machines are? This is where,
there we
a crowd of hands, you can't see the ones aren't up.
So virtual machines, if you're fairly new, virtual machines, you're basically just running machines within machines. So yeah, we don't really need to
it's as obvious
go
as that.
too deep into that.
No, that's all there is to it.
You all get it, right?
This is a host machine. Some guy on a host machine, he's like, hey, I want to have this Windows VM virtual machine up because I want to do some zany things against this Windows VM because Windows is more likely to be vulnerable to whatever. And so they spin up a virtual machine, and maybe they have this attacker VM as well to test against. They don't have to have multiple machines to do this. They do it all within their main host device. A few flavors of Linux that will get you going is go ahead and download just a basic Ubuntu desktop. And so you'll download an ISO and you'll make a VM. Again, Google all that. But it'll be a basic way to get to a terminal, an actual terminal that you can mess around with. After you get kind of familiar with that and how to install this stuff, download Kali and Security Onion. If you're unsure if you want to do red or blue team, go ahead and start and try doing both things.
Absolutely.
Like figure out a few of the commonly used tools here and a few commonly used tools there and get going. Eventually you'll feel very comfortable at the terminal. This is pretty important here. Like it seems like a funny GIF. It's great. You literally have unlimited power at the terminal. And so you have people who are like, well, can't you do this in Excel? Well, no, you can't do all this stuff in Excel, right? I heard some face palms. It's good. In Linux, you'll use grep and awk and some other stuff, but a lot of grep and awk, and you'll script those together, and in the end, you'll say, hey, I have unlimited power to some degree, like where if you learn these things to the extent, you can literally do anything. So,
anybody questions?
It's not bad, right? Yeah, any questions at all? We want to try to make it to where we can open up questions in the middle. Okay, no questions. It's good. Everyone gets it.
So networking, before you get started, it is a good idea to have a good idea about how networks function, how they work. So just understanding the basics, playing around. There's so much hardware available. You can literally go to Goodwill and buy routers.
eBay, Goodwill, whatever.
eBay. There's so many resources available. A lot of schools. There's a lot of people that donate. If you need some hardware, please just reach out to us. If you want to play with
we'll find a way to get you some hardware. If we're loaning it or whatever, we'll find a way.
Yeah, get you a setup at home so you can play around and, monitor your own traffic.
But for now, you can download Wireshark on your PC. If you don't start with VMs or anything, on your Windows box, on whatever box you have, you can download Wireshark and start monitoring your own traffic. And we'll show you just an example of what that looks like. If you really want to learn more about Wireshark, get Practical Pack Analysis version 3. There's the author right back there. Yeah, we will give away one of these today. It literally will get you started and basically ended in the basics of security monitoring and the advanced stuff in security monitoring and the command line stuff in security monitoring, or in the
It was
packet
the
analysis.
first security book I ever read. No joke.
It's
And
not technically a
Wireshark's
security
the most-
book, so, but
Well,
it literally has tons of security examples, regular examples.
absolutely.
It fits everybody. I was on a cruise not long ago and reading this. Like, if it's that good that you do it on a cruise, you're like, man, I want to read that book. I highly recommend it.
Jason checks in the mail.
Right, thank you. So full packet captures. We're talking about the full recordings of things. Getting all this network traffic. Basically, we have all these tools that just gather it up. And again, Wireshark can do it. There are command line tools that can do it. You can automate it. You can do all kinds of stuff. But in the end, it's pulling mostly the same thing, which is a full recording of everything you do on a network. There are tools when the network traffic is too much that you make metadata out of this stuff. Or you make just connection records out of this stuff. Like a full recording of a phone call versus just your little connection things that, I guess,
Your phone record that they
providers
mail
used to
you to
give,
say.
yeah. And then there are things that pull out just interesting stuff. This is Wireshark. This is what it looks like. Generally, this is meant to be an intimidating screenshot. Although, once you get to learning, yeah, it's less intimidating than TCP dump or something like that. But once you get to learning Wireshark, there's all kinds of statistical tools, things like that. You can get it to do basically whatever you want to with packets.
Right. And again, if that's too much information, there are tools that just pull metadata from that data so you get a better view of what you're actually searching for.
We'll describe those a little bit in this blue team bit. Blue team work. It's basically surveillance, mostly. Here is Security Onion. Security Onion is basically a big wrapped up ISO, a Linux distribution with all of these blue team tools. When I showed you the little graph, basically on one side of that graph were a bunch of tools that are included in Security Onion. So you don't have to really install any of this stuff. There's no challenge to getting it running. If you can get Security Onion running in a VM, you can do this. All the tools are open source within Security Onion. You basically reach out and ask for help on something. If there's a bug or whatever, you're probably going to get the tool author who comes back directly to you and is like, hey, you didn't try this, come on. But sometimes they'll be very helpful. It has a lot of graphical tools, a lot of command line tools. You can basically do everything that you'll do in blue team work, you'll do here. Here's an example of pulling some of that metadata. So right here, it looks like a lot of text, but pay attention to what's actually on here. There's laser works. It does work. Oh, not there. It's a TV. Basically, I'm pulling all of the images that this person browsed to on this lowcostusa.com and photobucket.com, where basically I just said, hey, print everything out, but then just show me the JPEGs. And you'll have the top right here, this grep JPEG. Again, I said grep sednock. I just said, hey, show me the JPEGs that are at the end of this. And so these are the files that this person actually went to. The silk output here doesn't make any sense in this context. But this is an example of all those connection records that in huge networks, you can easily pull stats on who is the busiest talkers, what guy's talking out to China a bunch, any kind of thing that you want.
So again, that's metadata that's basically pulled from the full packet capture. So you
Data
can see
about
all
data.
of these things in Wireshark, but you have to really filter it down. So
And on the fly, this is the faster way to do
Right.
it on like large networks, large captures. This is an example of Network Miner. I just put a PCAP in, and out came all these pictures and credentials and all kinds of stuff, as you can see in the tab at the top. This is a little coffin I built. Put wheels on it, and it hasn't worked yet, but as in it hasn't killed me yet. I'll sell it to you. We'll talk later. Network security monitoring is collection, detection, analysis. To wrap it up in a really summarized way, collection, you collect all this stuff. Detection, there are a lot of tools to bring out alerts and things like that. And then analysis, you actually do human, hands-on stuff and interpret that for other people. The whole process here, there are a lot of different tools used for these things. Specifically, like things like Snort and Suricata, they alert on stuff. You say, this is what a signature of what something bad looks like. It's going to look at all your data all the time and say, oh, I found that signature. Here's an alert for it. Maybe you should check it out. Bro, again, it's data about data, but can be used for detection as well. Mm-hmm. And then analysis. There are all kinds of different graphical tools that you can parse through all this data. I'll show you some examples in just a little bit when we do a red team, blue team example.
And again, those are all packaged into Security Onion, so you don't have to download and install them all, which is very nice. Red team tools. So we have a different set of tools. Some tools we share with blue team, but we have a specific operating system we use, which is called Kali Linux. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Kali Linux. Like Security Onion, Kali Linux is just prepackaged with all of the common pen testing tools. They're all built in. Again, one more warning. Please, please, please do this in a lab environment. Don't just go testing your bank online.
Even if you think you have permission, you don't always have permission from all parties either. You may have someone at your cousin's company, and he's like, oh yeah, you could do that here.
No,
that doesn't
you need
mean
written
you have
approval,
permission.
right? Even if you are in an engagement with a client and they've given you a range of IPs and they're like, yeah, we want you to, test these ranges, and you've compromised that, and you can go to a whole other subnet. No, you can't.
Verify.
They didn't give you permission. Don't do that.
So it's just easier to learn the stuff on your own in VMs and stuff. The same goes with the blue team monitoring before. You really don't want to see what your friends and family are browsing to on the internet. And when you accidentally start monitoring them, you're like, hey, this is not a bad idea. It's harmless. It's passive. It's not so harmless to you because you're like, oh, yeah, you're like, I now know them very personally. Again, these are, some examples. There are many warnings out there. You can't possibly do this stuff without seeing these warnings. Heed all of them. You have Aaron Schwartz isn't the best example of, a hacker or anything like that, but he is a good example of where the law really hammered down on a guy based on tons of different laws that they tried to put on him. In the end, they went through a bunch of legal proceedings, thought it was going to be nice and fine. He tried to make a plea agreement. They said no, so he hanged himself. He's dead now, and all because he wasn't even doing the stuff that we're talking about today, which in a minute will be like physically, or not physically attacking somebody, but it's basically they perceive it that way. You have, in the end, they will crash down on you very hard. And again, people are paid to watch this stuff.
So, what is a great way for you to set up something at home and practice? Well, we highly recommend, if you want to be a red team person, knowing the blue team side as well. So, downloading both Kali and Security Onion. Metasploitable 2 is basically just another operating system that is already vulnerable. You just have to turn it on, and you've got an operating system that has a bunch of vulnerable software ready for you to attack. You don't have to do anything, just turn it on. So you can, try attacking it from your Kali box. Try monitoring your attack with your Security Onion box. So, typical pen testing methodology. There's generally, I've heard different methodologies, but in summary, what you're going to start with is doing, a discovery or a mapping of the hosts that you're wanting to compromise. So you're going to start with like a network scan, see which hosts are out there, what services and ports are available for you to, attack. You're going to do an assessment on them. So you'll do some sort of, you could do manually vulnerability scan, or you could run scanners. There's lots of free scanners available. Then once you find what's vulnerable, you want to exploit it. And there's lots of tools already on Kali Linux with exploits ready for you to fire away. And then once you've done that, you pretty much rinse and repeat. So the discovery phase. What is the discovery phase? Again, you're mapping what's available. Let's say you're on a pen test. They've given you an IP range. You're going to first want to say, who's home? What's out there? What's available for me to attack? So you're going to run probably an nmap scan. Nmap is one of the most common tools I know of. It stands for Network Mapper. So basically what you see in this slide, we're scanning a range, and we're seeing that there are 4 hosts that report back and say, we're live on the network, we're turned on, we're home.
It's basically just rattling some windows to see who is actually home in here, maybe peeking through and seeing what you can do. There are more invasive things that you can do to test this, but this is just a very basic thing. If you're on your home network and it's all trusted and you have everyone's permission, scanning your home network is something that will reveal what hosts are actually up in most cases.
So here we did another in-map scan where we basically just said, hey, we see that this one host is up. Scan this host. Tell us what services are turned on, what's running. And in-map can go so far as to guess what version of a service is running. We highlighted this FTP service at the top. That's VSFPTD 2.3.4. So that's going to follow through in our example. So just note there that we scanned that host, we saw that that service was open, and that's an older version of that FTP server.
If you saw this amount of services on a device in your house, probably should be suspicious as well. This is, again, a vulnerable host that we've set up. So it was made for the purpose of doing some sort of investigation on and testing against.
So now that we've discovered what's there, we've mapped it out, we know who's home, we know what's running, let's do an assessment. OpenVOS is a vulnerability scanner, and you can basically just set it up. It's on Kali Linux, of course. You can put in the IP address, and it will run through and do kind of an invasive assessment for you.
Never mind the cartoons. So
yeah, don't let that fool you. It's a decent
free.
Tool.
A lot of people use tools like Nessus and a few other tools like that. Many of those have gotten very, very commercial over time because they're all quite good. But OpenVOS is still completely free. The cartoons may seem like it's lighthearted, but it is very serious, and will very much help you out on compromising hosts.
So here's a result from this scan for that host. I think you can, did we highlight there should be a finding for the FTP server on here.
Yeah,
but basically, it spits out a result saying, hey, here's what OpenVOS found. These are the services that we found are running. Here's how severe this exploit is. It gives you a guess at how likely they think their test was to be accurate. So we found where is it at?
It's about a little lower.
Okay, yeah, it's kind of in the mid-screen, but it says, hey, we think there's a 99% chance that this is actually a legitimate thing that we can exploit. If you click into that, again, it tells you this is what we found. It's this version, and it's affected. There's an exploit available. There's references at the bottom, so you can go study about why that was vulnerable.
Please do each time.
Absolutely.
They won't make sense at first, but over time, these things will make more and more sense. You'll see that they're more and more common. It's like, oh, well, some sort of, this vulnerability, figure out what the terminology is.
And you can't really see that at all. Okay. Well, basically, we're moving on to the exploitation phase. So now we found our vulnerability, and now we want to exploit it. We know that it's vulnerable. Metasploit is everyone pretty much heard of Metasploit? Okay, so Metasploit, this is MSF console, which is just like the interface to Metasploit on the command line. There we go. So basically we power it up and we say, hey, let's search through your database and tell me if you already have an exploit built for me because I don't know how to create malware yet, I'm just starting. Tell me if you have an exploit in here. So we search through and sure enough, there's an exploit already saved in its database, ready. All you have to do is tailor it to your host that you want to attack.
To summarize, Metasploit's an exploitation framework that you can kick up, and chances are it's probably going to have something for most things that OpenVOS is going to report back to you. Especially if it's like a high risk, 99% chance it's vulnerable, you're probably going to find something in Metasploit for it. Even if it's pretty modern, you will be able to find it online or be able to load it in.
So now we exploit it. So here we go. We've selected our exploit. We tailor it to fit the IP address that we're attacking. It runs the exploit. We see some FTP commands. And then bottom line, we see that we have a command shell session opened between their host and ours. So we have command line access to that host. We run the ID command, and it tells us that we have the privilege of root user. So we have root level access on that box.
So basically, you've won for that box.
Victory!
So celebration, right? But not so fast, because it's not so easy if you are actually a bad guy and you're like, hey, I want to use all these tricks for money and go rob people, basically. Because just the exploit alone, which was about 3 lines, you typed about 3 lines, still made 14 events. So the attack or the blue team guy or gal who was watching suddenly was like, oh, okay. I see what's going on here. we have that honeypot or that vulnerable host that we put out there on our network. Somebody compromised that. Let's see what's going on here. And they were also internal, which is would be a fun day for that person. They would love that. Like, oh, let's put the hammer down. But even more so, it was only after you made a lot more alerts with your scan.
Right.
Your scan was very, very, very loud. This is just one page of these. I don't expect you to read everything, but your scan looked for all kinds of vulnerabilities. And as it looks for those, a lot of those are very, very invasive that we will see those on the network, to the point where just your user agent, your identifier that is OpenVOS, we saw that at least 50,000 times. So there were roughly 100,000 alerts in total, that we saw these that just showed up here. So your scan, which seemed benign, and your exploitation that seemed easy, actually generated over 100,000 alerts. And someone got probably mad on the blue team. They're like, oh God, this guy, he's so many alerts we have to close out now. This is ridiculous. So, in conclusion, it didn't seem all that bad, right? There's a lot to learn, but it's pretty structured once you have a focus.
Right.
It's all quite fun, once you get used to it. At first, it may seem overburdening. It may seem like it's very difficult, especially if you're alone in learning it, but you're not alone in learning it if you'll reach out to people. Like, don't feel so shy that you can't reach out to people online or in person. People give talks like this quite a bit at different conferences, different BSides, if you just reach out to them. So, for instance, I'll be in the fishbowl for a while. The room's down here. I'll be with the Rural Technology Fund talking about some stuff. If you want to know more about some of the stuff you don't already know, come talk to me. I may not know what I'm talking about on what you ask me. I may know a lot. I'll definitely be able to reference you to something and reference you to somebody. To summarize, the blue team stuff is collection, detection, analysis. We do surveillance work, and then we try to detect bad stuff. We don't care about monitoring good stuff for the most part, outside of knowing what is a critical asset or what is a very valuable thing on the network. We care about that stuff because we want to defend against it. Anything attacking all that. We do detection based on those alerting. That's what actually catches the baddies. But then you have 100,000 alerts to go through where we do analysis and we say, this was the actual exploitation. Again, 100,000 alerts, only 14 of those made up an actual exploit that compromised the host. So it's a matter of verifying that there was a compromised host, not just a scanned host. Because on the internet, if you're exposed to the internet, everyone is scanning you all the time.
So red team people, again, we're doing the opposite, but what we're doing is to support and help companies, not because we want to just feel good about our pen testing skills. You're wanting to help the company by testing the resources that they gave you permission to test. You're wanting to do that as quietly as possible so that blue team doesn't detect you, because, we want to mimic what a legitimate attacker would do. Most attacks, people have months and years to work on breaking into something, whereas when you have a pen test, you may just have a week or two to do your job. So you want to do the best job you can, be very thorough. Again, the methodology of discovering, what's out there, what do they have. I've tested some companies that, were like, hey, we see you have all this stuff running, and they're like, we didn't know about that.
Every company will
so
be
again,
like that.
Even that phase is very important. What do you see running, and being very thorough about that, doing a good assessment of it, what's vulnerable. Some companies don't want you to exploit things. They just want you to do a really good vulnerability scan, and then tell them, hey, here's what we found, here's what's vulnerable, you need to patch these things. We don't actually know how severe they are or if they can be exploited, so maybe you stop there. Then other people do want you to go ahead and say, we really want to prove to the guys upstairs that this is bad stuff, so make this as bad as you can, exploit everything, own our network, show how bad this could really get. And that helps, usually the security team get funding for more tools for detection.
You're given that scope.
Right.
You don't figure it out on your own and be like, I'm going to own everybody. They give you a scope, and you stick to that. Again, it goes about permission. Even when you have permission, don't go too crazy. And I guess lastly, the other stuff here is that, I talk about compliance administration briefly in the beginning, and even though we aren't doing compliance or administration, we know a ton of people who are. They do keep everything running. They are the ones who are actually trying to reduce that attack surface all the time. They're keeping your company legal. They're keeping your security department intact. They are, while we talked about operations, you could talk for days on compliance and days on administration.
Absolutely. And I think the main point is that everybody's trying to work together. Red team's really cool. It's kind of portrayed as the sexier side of security because you're a hacker and it's so cool. But blue team is just as important. And I've played both roles so far, and I can honestly say that by being a red team person, it's made me much better as a blue team person now. When I see a scan, I'm like, guys, we need to pay attention to this. I kind of have, you can kind of see both roles. So, I think that's important. They're the same coin, just two sides of it. And the main goal is to protect data.
So how do you actually get a job doing this? You don't want to go into interviews and feel very nervous because you don't know anything. You can't expect, in most cases, to get a job and then start learning. That's the thing about information security, is that there are few jobs available to people who are not currently skilled. And a lot of times when a place is hiring, it's because they have no one, or they have no one skilled currently. So don't expect to even go to a place if you get that job and be able to easily learn. Your key is actually taking it and trying to make a passion out of it. And a lot of times, again, that comes to knowing somebody else and trying to bring people together to maybe learn it with you, because it's so much easier to stay on it if you do that. Certs, they're great, but they'll get you through the door to an interview.
Right.
But don't rely on a cert. Don't think that you can say, oh, well, I could either learn this on my own for, weeks and months at a time, or I could do this week course and be done. It takes more than a week to learn this stuff. And usually people anyways don't have the money for those week courses when they start out, because they're not actually in a job anyways. So get experience.
To add on to what he was saying about when you're researching jobs, and they have 15 to 20 bullets of, we want somebody that can do this, 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 and this. I've interviewed for many roles where I maybe only knew 3 to 5 of those bullets that I felt like I'm moderately confident I can talk about these things. And that's okay. Most people just, a lot of people are posting because they want a superstar that can do everything. But that doesn't mean that they don't want someone that can do 5 of those things really well. They understand. I feel like our community knows, it's really hard to find somebody that just knows all of it. There's way too much to know. And I do think the community is very understanding. So don't let that hold you back from applying to jobs that are interesting to you, because you will get there. It just takes time to get up that learning curve.
And maybe most importantly, it's good to make this a career if you really jump into it and spend all this time, especially if you're in a job and you have to learn this after work and you're spending nights and stuff. Just make it a career. Start going to, you're already here, so it's already a good sign. But contribute at BSides, things like that. They always need help. If you like to code, take on a security project. That's a great way to get really interested and get other people interested in you in the community as well. And once you grow forward, maybe either contribute or start a technical blog. Maybe nobody will read it, but you will have been blogging things, and actually later on down the road, you'll be able to look back and be like, I remember when I was doing that, and it'll be good. So.
Questions? Anybody? Yes.
Oh.
Are there any actual packet capture tools that aren't built on libpcap?
They're on libpcap specifically. That's a good question. What do you think, Chris?
I asked why. Learn something new. Libpcap's the standard, right? So there's a reason it's a standard. It's all these tools to build around it. And I don't think when we talk about building on libpcap, generally they're probably going to parse whatever the other tools are probably going to parse the PCAP format anyway. So I would say it doesn't necessarily matter so much as long as they read a PCAP file format, because that's the standard.
Mm-hmm. You had a question? So the question was, if you are a hacker and if a blue team person, can they find you based on IP? So this can actually this will be a fun political question. So we talk about Russia, things like that. So all these hackers, hacking campaigns here and there and that and the other. It's quite challenging sometimes if you're a very, very skilled attacker. It'll be challenging for a blue team person to guarantee with 100% accuracy that yes, this person is from Russia. that they didn't, like you said scramble. Well, a lot of people, what they do is they proxy around. So I may be in the U.S., like I may be right here, and I may, buy some proxy, which means I route my traffic basically through another place, and then through another place, and then I attack from there. Well, from most blue teamers' perspectives, especially if you don't have access to a ton of intel or a ton of connections, outside of some very large organizations, it's going to be hard for the random person to be like, oh, I bet they were here, because it's going to look like Russia. It's going to look like Ukraine or somewhere like that. So, yeah, right. So yeah, it's
very hard to confirm if the source that you're seeing is actually that source.
Yeah. But the good news from the blue team perspective is that not everyone is that smart. And a lot of places, as far as like running those down, it's still not necessarily like, if your question is actually, can I actually do this and make some money by proxying through Ukraine? Maybe for a while, but I wouldn't recommend it.
In a pen testing like engagement where, a company's paid you to come in, usually all of the pen testers will give the company like I was testing from my house, so I just gave them my home IP address. That way, the blue team, usually they won't tell, the blue team people that a pen test is happening. They'll wait and see if they catch it. But normally, we'll go ahead and give somebody our IP addresses. When they do detect it, they have a way to say, okay, well, let's confirm that's not a legitimate attack. Okay, yeah, we paid this company to come in. That way they know that it was, something they asked for, not a true attack on their environment.
So how often would it come up that you'd be dealing with backfill production servers?
How often would it come up that you're dealing with production servers in work?
You're right.
So hopefully it is rare that you're actually doing
Absolutely.
that. In theory, yeah, you should not be doing that very often. But
so from a detection perspective, you should always be monitoring things in production.
Oh, that's a good point.
From a pen testing perspective, it depends on what it is. When you exploit things, sometimes we take servers down. We may request that they, use something that's in their QA environment so that, they'll just, make a backup copy and let us attack that. It really depends on what the resource is and how important it is. Or we've had companies that request, hey, we want you to do a big vulnerability scan. That sometimes that can hurt the bandwidth or really take them offline. So they may request we do that at nighttime. So that way they have time to recover if there's an issue.
Yeah.
Right. So all of those things in a pen test, they are very, very thorough. They talk back and forth. They get a very clear line of what is our scope of our engagement, and we do not go outside of that scope.
Yeah. But that's a consulting pen test company too, that they do this all the time. There are some companies who have one red team guy, and maybe it's this person has just started learning or something like that, and they're like, hey, can you do a vulnerability test against all of our stuff? And maybe it's a bunch of old legacy things, and next thing you know, they're bringing down some sort of network equipment. I don't know how this happened. Of course you don't. You just started. You really can't be expected to know.
Yeah.
But so it's on the company sometimes to know this stuff.
Right.
But again, it comes down to not many companies have that knowledge. So that's why a lot of times they go to consulting companies, because these are companies that are entirely made up of people who know this stuff.
Right.
So Tara, Twitter handle, but I'm thinking next time you do this,
we tried to, but all of his blue shirts, the centers were wrinkled funny, and I was like, "That's wrinkled funny." He's like, "All my shirts are like this."
Yeah, I work from home, so
we need to get you some more shirts,
bro. Dress clothes. What is this? They're all wrinkled. Okay, yeah. Wear some linen or something that's naturally wrinkly. So.
Yes.
Well, I might amplify one point I think you were making. Part of where I've learned some of what I've done is by working in volunteer organizations and helping to set up, and then that also let me pull off a little bit of a corner that I can go from both sides.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
You just got to be careful about the stuff that you don't know that you don't know.
Absolutely, yeah. Be honest with
work
yourself too on that.
Sometimes an inexperienced security person is better, and sometimes worse than no security person.
Absolutely.
Good point. Yeah.
How will they learn? Anybody else?
There's no more questions. Yeah, we will give away some stuff. Yeah.
Ta-da.
Okay, so I'll be the Price is Right show person here.
Okay.
I guess we need this now.
I guess you don't.
Tell them what we have.
No, let me hold it.
Oh.
I'll be the Vanna. Da-da.
So this is Practical Packet Analysis by Chris Sanders. This is version 3. It is flawless.
That's right.
It comes with a Rural Technology Fund card in here because they are the ones who have pushed this forward. Rural Technology Fund, again, you've already heard me probably before this talk, but they are an organization, a nonprofit that goes around and make sure that rural schools and rural areas have the opportunities, or at least close to the opportunities, that more urban schools have. A lot of urban schools have tons of funding, sometimes too much funding that they don't even know what to do with. This is a means of giving rural areas, 3D printers and, labs of Chromebooks and things like that.
Raspberry Pis.
Yeah, Raspberry Pis. If they have a need, especially if it's a need for like a dispersed classroom, chances are the Rural Technology Fund can provide, especially if they reach out. There's means of reaching out to the Rural Technology Fund if you're with a rural school or something like that. There's a means of recommending. You can reach out directly to them, and they will hopefully provide if they can. I think last year they impacted 10,000 children, and this year they are already. What is the number? Probably already at 12,000 already. So, and this is it's on behalf of Chris Sanders. Again, he runs the Rural Technology Fund and really puts in a ton of work on it. To the point that he also has, again, the Rural Technology Fund has a booth as well over in the Fishbowl. It's not just a giveaway there for another copy of this, but they're also giving away classes for his training program, which you can go see him again immediately after this. He'll talk to you all about it. But it's about $1,500 worth of stuff. It's a silent auction over there. So chances are you can probably grab up an $800 packet analysis class for less than $800 probably. But I highly recommend you go there as soon as possible, whenever you can.
But
for
the
now,
book,
yeah,
the
for
book
now.
is what we're giving away, and the book is really awesome. Again, this is one of the first books that I started with. It's how do I use Wireshark? How do I capture, PCAP? What does all this stuff mean? And it breaks it down. Chris is an excellent teacher. He has excellent humor in the book. He's from Kentucky, and maybe just because I know your voice as I read it, I can hear you. But it's
true.
Good. It's like his accent is in the book, but it's an excellent book. So I do.
So preferably this goes to someone who is fairly fresh to InfoSec, since that's what this talk is geared at. Of the people fairly fresh to InfoSec.
Youngest person?
Trivia question. This is a hard one. I don't expect an answer. What is one of the detection tools for blue team work? Actually, any of them. Are you new to InfoSec?
I'm new to InfoSec.
What is one of the things? Snort. You win a copy of Practical Packet Analysis.
Congratulations!
Your keynote speaker, the Defensive Security Handbook, which was recently released, and a lot of other goodies that you will have to discover once you win this. Do you have another trivia question?
No.
You don't have a trivia question.
You didn't tell me to prepare for that.
I did not prepare either. So.
It wasn't in your scope.
It wasn't in my scope. That's right.
Good
Thank
point,
you.
yeah.
He gets me.
That probably could have been the trivia question. What is the most important thing that you should do before you do any of these activities? Oh, you're first. Are you new to InfoSec? I don't know if I said new to InfoSec.
My hands up.
Who said what?
I said get permission.
Are y'all together?
No.
Okay. I feel like everything going to the same house would be somehow wrong.
No, we all three took the same Cisco routers class.
Cisco people as well taking Cisco classes. Okay, pulling on my heartstrings. Cisco's watching this at least. Okay, well, we appreciate everything. Again, please make it over to the RTF booth and have a good day.
If anyone has questions about jobs, come talk to us. We'd be happy to tell you about those roles.
All right, thank you very much.